Hello and bookish friends, welcome back. I am Elizabeth, this is Reading Riley, and today we're going to do the mid-year book freakout tag for 2023. I'm a little bit behind, okay? I'm like a month and a half behind on this trend, but I figured it's a great way to check in with what I've been reading this year, and I still want to do it anyway. So if you're new to my channel, actually, this is going to give you a really good idea of the kind of books that I enjoy, what I like to read. I'll also link my previous mid-year freakout tags above and below, just in case you're interested in seeing those. I got these questions from Gabby's version, so I have no idea what the original questions are, if this is new, 2.0, 3.0, whatever, but let's just do it, okay? Question number one is, of course, starting out with a hard hitter, best book you've read so far in 2023, and of course I can't just give you one, cause no. So I'm going to talk about a few. The first of which being the Book of the Most Precious Substance. This is by Sarah Gran. Read this at the beginning of the year, and I think I only gave it 4 stars to be honest, but this has just stayed with me. There's something so real and frank about the writing in this story and the perspective of our main character that I just find so refreshing. It's not pretty and it's not perfect, but it is real. You know what I mean? Anyway, we're following a former novelist and current rare book dealer, Lily Albrecht, and she has had this like terrible tragedy in her life. She found the one, and she describes it in a way that is just like, oh my god, this person that you meet, and just like you're so lucky to have met them. Like you've been so lucky in every aspect of your life in order to lead you to this person who makes you feel like you don't have to compromise at all. In fact, not having to compromise is something that wouldn't even cross your mind because you fit each other so perfectly, and both of your weaknesses make the other person a better person. I can't just like, the way she described this love, I can't do it justice. But you lose all that. You lose it all. Lily lost it all. And now she is just kind of like trotting along, trying to sell rare books to make ends meet. Anyway, she comes across this deal. This is gonna be a long video, fuck. I'm feeling verbose. She comes across this book, or this person who's looking for a book called The Book of the Most Precious Substance, and this is a 17th century manual on sex magic that promises unlimited power. If she can find it, this is the deal of a lifetime, a deal of the century. This can change her whole life. It can make everything better. But she has to kind of travel around the world to all these different places to get clues, to find out if this is even a real thing, and it was amazing. That's all I'm gonna say about it. The next book I want to talk about is The Husbands by Chandler Baker. This was my first Chandler Baker book that I read and my first 5-star of 2023. Loved this so much. This novel explores the lengths to which a woman will go in order to get just a little more help from her husband. This is a social horror and sort of a gender-swapped Stepford Wives. We are following Nora Spangler, and she's a high-powered attorney, a badass at work, but then she comes home and she does everything at home, and she's a badass at home too. And her husband's trying, and he's not like the villain in this story. He's trying, but she just can't help but notice how little he does. Anyway, so they are going house shopping because she's also pregnant, if I remember correctly. And they need a bigger house. They go into this neighborhood, Dynasty Ranch, and it's this very exclusive suburban community. And in this community, she meets all of these women who are high-powered. They are CEOs, they are novelists, they are neurosurgeons. They've all got their shit together, and their husbands are really, really helpful. Nora gets involved with a wrongful death case that they are needing help with. Shit goes down. It's amazing. The social commentary is exquisite. I kind of felt like I should be reading this in secret, like I shouldn't show my husband because she might be learning things. She might be out there learning about gender and the patriarchy. What? No.
I wasn't learning about womanly things.
Anyway, it's great. It's so good. Read it. Another one I want to talk about is Full Immersion by Gemma Amor. Whew, heavy, but weird in the best way. This does lean more towards sci-fi. It's got this odd element to it that I don't really want to get into because it's just a hair of a spoiler, but this is definitely about depression and trauma and working through that, I suppose. But the setup is just so incredible. And we're following this woman, Magpie. And I don't know what it is about. Why? Okay, can someone please explain to me why British people are obsessed with magpies? It's a thing, right? It's not just me, it's a thing, right? If you're British, hit me up in the comments. Anyway, her name's Magpie. Also, this audiobook is narrated by Gemma Amor, and she does fantastic. Magpie is desperate. She's desperate to try anything, and so she gets involved in this experiment. She wakes up and she is in this field and she sees her own dead body. So it's kind of just like the beginning of this just submerses you into her situation. There's this man standing there. She doesn't know who he is, and she realizes that she has to solve her own murder and figure out why she died. There's also this thing called the silhouette that is kind of following her. You know, it's hard to explain without giving too much away, but this is just deeply, deeply self-aware and dark in a very real, horrific way. It's like real life horror. So the horror aspect of it, it reminds me of like Ian Reid's writing, like We Spread. So it's not your typical horror, but it makes you, it's very thoughtful and heartbreaking and entertaining. So anyway, it's kind of a fatty. How long is this? 350 pages, but well worth it. Very, very good. And actually, I think that's all I'm going to talk about with these three because we're still on the first question and I need to move on. I had another one, but I'm going to talk about it in my monthly wrap-up this month. So okay, I totally skipped number 2. Just went right over it. So let's go back to that for a moment. Number 2 is what was your favorite sequel that you read this year? And for me, that was Finders Keepers. It is number 2 in the Bill Hodges trilogy by Stephen King. The first book is Mr. Mercedes. And if you are a fan of like dark thrillers of Karen Slaughter, things like that, I would definitely suggest reading this one if you haven't already. Certain stories of his I really, really enjoy, and this was one of them. I still need to finish the 3rd book in the series. But anyway, Mr. Mercedes, we're following this serial killer, this mass killer. So one day there's all these people in line in a small town. They're in line at this job fair because they're desperate for jobs. And this guy in a Mercedes just plows through the crowd, kills a whole bunch of people, injures more, and they never caught the guy. Bill Hodges, on the other hand, after this has retired. He is contemplating suicide because he is one of those people that just lived for his job and he has nothing to live for now. He's just by himself when he gets a letter in the mail from the killer who is taunting him. During the course of him investigating this, he is back on it. He gets his life back because he has something to live for. He acquires this group of really unique friends along the way. All of these characters are amazing as well. Finders Keepers was way different from the first book, which I was not expecting because we're following different characters, but Bill Hodges and this crew ultimately are always there in the sidelines, and they come back into the story towards the end, and it was very good. So let's go on back to past Elizabeth. Okay, question number 2, a new release that you haven't read yet but want to. And for me, I came across this new release the other day and immediately had to find it because it sounds so freaking good. It's called The Force of Such Beauty by Barbara Borland. First of all, cover's gorgeous. Can't wait to get my hands on this. And then this is kind of like fairy tale meets a discussion about women in the world. I think as I was putting this together, I was finding that I have very specific taste, I guess. A lot of these books are quite similar. In an idyllic kingdom by the sea, a princess named Caroline pretends to sleep. When her keepers strike up a card game, Caroline sneaks out in her maid's car and turns the key and then drives right out of the palace. Alone for the first time in years, she gets on the next flight only to land in the waiting arms of her guards. As she's forcibly escorted back to her marble prison, something in Caroline breaks for good. It's not her first failed attempt and it won't be her last. It says this is a phantasmagorical fable of love and marriage. Both the story of an idealistic young woman trapped by a corrupt promise and a deeply moving reminder that power structures around the world ultimately rest in the subjugation of women's bodies. You see what I mean now. This is one of several books to come out this year concerned with the appropriation of female beauty by powerful men, which another one I'm going to talk to you about in a little bit. And it examines a harsh choice in the lives of women dubbed desirable by the patriarchal state. Do you participate or do you say no? So, and framed as like a fairy tale, done. Get out of here. Get out of here. Okay, next. Another new release I haven't read yet but want to is Mayfly by CJ Lead. This is more extreme horror, I believe, and we're following a woman. Oh, her name's Mayfly. I think her name's Mayfly. Duh. Anyway, she works at Disney World or some appropriation thereof, and she plays everyone's favorite princess, I'm guessing Elsa. At night, she haunts the dive bars with a drink in one hand and a book in the other, imitating her misanthropic literary heroes. So what does that mean? She's an asshole? You know what comes to mind is Hemingway.
Fucking hate that man.
She meets some guy. Oh, her best friend's brother, Gideon, and he awakens something dangerous within her. I think she's going to start killing or something, and I think it's going to be gruesome and bloody and full of female rage. Number 4, the most anticipated release for the rest of the year. And I have one and one alone, no runner-up, no nothing. I cannot wait to read this book, and I actually have a little announcement to talk to you about concerning this story, but I'll go ahead and tell you what that is, and it's Rouge by Mona Awad. Mona Awad is one of my favorite writers. I love her words, I love her brain, I love her coolness, her weirdness. I think she's fantastic. And if you don't know what this is about, this is again kind of a take on a fairy tale, also social commentary about women's bodies. We're following Belle. Are we surprised? Belle is obsessed with her hair and her skin and skincare videos, and then her estranged mother dies. Belle finds herself back in California. So this strange woman stops by her mother's funeral and gives her this little clue about her mother and this little tidbit about this transformative spa experience. Turns out it's some kind of culty spa called La Maison de Méduse. Reference to Medusa, perhaps, which I like. She's lured into their embrace and, you know, it gets wild, I'm sure. I'm sure. The comp titles for this are Snow White meets Eyes Wide Shut. So culty, weird, satanistic, maybe not, that's a little, I don't know. You know what, I'm not gonna speculate. I want to read it. And my announcement involving this particular book is that this is going to be a Midnight Society book club pick. We're reading this, first of all, in October. It comes out September 12th. We will be reading it in October. So it gives you some time to get the book and acquire it. I'm going to be reading this with the one and only Kayla from Books and Lala. So excited to have her on my channel. It's a first, it's a milestone. I cannot wait to see what she's gonna think about this because she and I have similar taste in weird stuff, and Mona Awad in particular. I'm also going to be joined by Stephanie from Books in the Freezer. If you're not aware of the podcast Books in the Freezer, you need to go check it out immediately. Stephanie is the host. She talks all about horror books. She has some really incredible guests on there. I know she's had Riley Sager as a guest recently. She's had Rachel Harrison on there. She talks all nerd things as well. Twilight Zone stuff. She talks Taylor Swift stuff if you're interested in that. She's great, and she has a lot of insight into horror. And so I'm very excited to hear what she has to say about this as well. I think it's going to be a fantastic live show, and I hope you all will join us. I don't have the date for that yet, but of course I will let you know on the Midnight Society Book Club Instagram. So go follow that if you're not already so you can keep up to date. Anyway, Let's move on to the next question. Okay, and this is kind of a letdown because the next question, number 5, is biggest disappointment. I read from this author last year and loved this book, and that was Fantastic Land by Mike Bakoven. And so when he had a new release coming out, I could not wait to get my hands on it, and it was called Killing It. This is my second book that I've read from this author, and unfortunately, it just didn't hold up to my expectations of the first one. It's a horror story about comedians, and it's kind of a slasher story. All of these comedians are stuck in this, what do they call them? Comedy house, and they're being slaughtered. I was super let down. It ended up being kind of ghosty, and I'm weird about ghosty things, so that's me. It was not explained at all. The ghosty part felt cheap to me. There was just no motive. There was no motive for all of these killings. It made no sense. And so I didn't care about the people. I didn't care when they died. But there was some really interesting commentary in there about women, female comedians, and in the industry, how they are the minority, and so they have to put up with a lot of bullshit. But also a few things that were just like a really nice ode to comedians of the past, like George Carlin or like Steve Martin, old school comedians. So I did appreciate that, but didn't love it. And now I don't know if I want to read more Mike Bakoven, or Fantastic Land was just the odd one out, you know? I'm now questioning whether I actually liked the story or if it was just that interview style formatting and the incredible audiobook that really just kind of like sucked me in. So I'm not sure. Okay, number 6 is the biggest surprise so far this year. I had actually a few answers to this one. One, Lessons in Chemistry, and then also The Butcher by Jennifer Hillier. And both of those I surprisingly loved, but also both of those I should not have been surprised at all for loving them because I love Jennifer Hillier. I avoided that one because of the way the story was told. Because it's a mystery where you know the killer. And I was like, I don't know if I'm into that. I was. It's amazing. And then Lessons in Chemistry, I, for some reason, just didn't read it, even though it seemed like it's everything I could ever want. And then I was surprised when I loved it. So I don't think those count. But I am going to talk more about that one in a minute. But for now, let's talk about Look Closer by David Ellis. This one was something that had been recommended to me several times, and I just didn't pick it up. Like, nothing about this cover did it for me. It looked like pretty generic thriller. It's a male author. I'm like, I don't know. It just doesn't, it wasn't high on my list. Picked it up, very surprised. He is an incredible thriller writer. The twists, the misdirection, very, very, very well done. This is a chunker. Just so you know, I think it's about 400 pages. Yeah, 420-ish. So we're following this couple, Simon and Vicky. He is a professor, and she works for what does she work for? Oh, she helps women who are being abused. She's a social worker. That's it. Anyway, they seemingly are this normal couple, but they're actually very much not. One of them might be a killer. There's a second perspective, or second person perspective in here that gives very much Joe Goldberg, if you liked that. The twists were incredible. I don't even know how to talk about this book because what you think at the beginning is so vastly independent of what you actually think at the end or know at the end. So it's like, I don't even, why bother telling you anything? Just read it. Just read it. Okay, let's move on to number 7, new favorite author. This is a debut author or new to you. I've been reading a lot of new authors this year. I feel like my tastes have kind of taken a small tangent, and I'm like just diving head in all of these authors that I had never tried before. And I'm loving a lot of them. But I think I have like 3 top contenders for new to me this year. First of all, Chandler Baker. I've read 2 of her books now and loved them both. I just relate to her. She lives around the area that I live in Texas, in DFW, and I just relate to her writing so much. I love her social commentary. I think she's witty, and I think she's very smart. The next one is Kia Abdullah. I've read a few of her books now and just really, really enjoy her writing style. She brings something very unique to this genre. She has her own point of view as a Muslim woman, and that is always the center of the setting, which I love. She kind of balances this tightrope between legal thriller and family drama that I never thought I would be comfortable with, because I just don't like it if it's drama, because it's still twisty. Her books are still twisty, but the drama is very much internal and within a family dynamic, and also has this legal component to it that you're like, okay, is it right, is it wrong? And then is it legally, is it right, is it wrong? So there's much to contemplate within that. I think she's great. And then lastly, I want to talk about a debut author who is also new to me, and that I just finished one of their books. I think I may have mentioned it earlier, and that is Mary, An Awakening of Terror by Nat Cassidy. This one came out last year around this time, and I just never read it. I couldn't get my hands on an audiobook. That's what it was. So when I finally did, it was so good. I just read it this month. This is the one that I'm going to be talking to you about more in my wrap-up, but Nat Cassidy's writing is freaking amazing. Beautiful. It's beautiful. It's thoughtful. I didn't even care that he was writing from a woman's perspective about menopause. Don't even care. I don't care. He's great. Newest fictional crush. I don't read romance, and so I don't get crushes on my characters, but if I had to pick one, Elizabeth Zott. Yeah, that's who I would pick because she's freaking amazing. And moving on to the next is newest favorite character, which is definitely going to be Elizabeth Zott. So we can talk more about this, as well as another one that I want to discuss with you. I love her. I love her. If you haven't read Lessons in Chemistry yet, just read it, because honestly, like, I don't know what was holding me back. Maybe it was the hype. It was something. I don't know what it was, but it's about this woman, Elizabeth Zott, who lives in the 60s, and she just refuses to submit herself to the patriarchy. And I think she's a little bit neurodivergent. I would consider her that anyway, because she is just so unaware of social norms. She has her own way of thinking, and nobody's going to tell her otherwise. And she's a fucking badass. Elizabeth Zott is a scientist, so it's also about women in STEM. It's giving the marvelous Mrs. Maisel vibes, except she's not a comedian, she's a scientist. And honestly, like, I feel like most people know what this book is about, so I'm not going to go into huge depth about it, but if you are remotely interested, read this book, because honestly, it was hilarious, it was heartfelt, and you will fall in love with Elizabeth Zott. You will. Another fictional character that I fell in love with was also a new to me author, and I'm really glad that I got a chance to talk about this on this list, because I was very impressed when I read A House Without Good Bones by T. Kingfisher. It was my first T. Kingfisher, and really loved her authorial voice, her characters, and in particular Sam Montgomery, who is the main character of this story. Sam Montgomery is a paleontologist?
No.
Oh no, what is she? Hold on, Sam Montgomery. Nope, I don't remember what the hell she is. She digs for stuff, bugs.
The bugs.
She's a plus size woman. She's very comfortable in her body. She's very smart. And this is a Southern Gothic, and so it's like, it looks like this like little old lady type of vibe, and that is very much intentional. There are bugs and roses and spirits, and anyway, she's coming home to stay with her mom. Her mom's acting weird. This is the house that grandma used to live in until grandma passed away. Grandma was an effed up lady. It gets wild. This is definitely, like, the plot of this is over the top, supernatural, weird stuff. But I think because it was so over the top, it allowed me to not be so critical about the supernatural elements. And I ended up really liking it and just falling in love with Sam Montgomery as well. I think she is a well-rounded character that was just so incredibly relatable and funny and smart. Next is a book that made you cry. I think I've cried at several. I'm pretty sure I cried at Tomorrow. Though I honestly don't know if that was last year or this year. I think it was this year. I definitely cried at Lessons in Chemistry. But this one made me, like, ugly cry, and that is Page Boy by Elliot Page. This is a coming-of-age memoir. It talks about his transition. It talks about Hollywood and life being an actor, where he thought that he could not be himself, like he had to be one certain thing. He had to fit into a box in order to get any kind of roles. And it also talks about just like him as a person. I think he's a beautiful person. I think he's an empath. The way that he feels things, like touches my soul and describes those things and has such empathy for other people. I think he's just a truly beautiful soul. And of course it's narrated by Elliot Page, which makes it feel even more special and intimate and like you're just having a conversation with a friend. So highly recommend that one. A book that made you happy. I'm tempted to say Follow Me to Ground. Who's this by? Sue Rainsford. Because this one just was really light and magical for me, even though it was still dark. But I think making me happy is taking it a little bit too far and saying too many things about me that I don't really want to investigate. So I'm going to talk about Romancing Mr. Bridgerton by Julia Quinn because that one truly did make me happy and made me smile. Every once in a while, you know, I want a romance. If you are familiar with the Bridgertons at all, there's a Netflix series right now that is huge. That's an adaptation of these stories. I haven't read any of the other stories in this series, but I do love the show and I had to know about the relationship between Colin and Penelope. So I won't give you any spoilers for that, but it just, I did love the writing. I am kind of picky about my romance scenes with romance, and it was exactly everything that I wanted and funny and cute and witty, and I can't wait for it to be adapted. Okay, let's talk about my favorite book to film adaptation, and I was thinking really hard about this one, like what was my favorite? There were some flops this year. Cabin at the Woods, Knock at the Woods, Knock at the Cabin at the End of the World, whatever the hell they called the Paul Tremblay book. I'm so sorry about my dogs. One that I did not newly watch this year, but which I absolutely adore, is of course Sharp Objects by Gillian Flynn. That was adapted into the most gorgeous Southern Gothic mini-series. A limited series is what it is. Recently watched that again. Of course, Amy Adams is the queen and love that one. But there is one that is new to this year that is also a TV adaptation. So not a film, but whatever. And that made the book better. I read this book. I thought it was okay. The adaptation, better than the book, 100%. Anyway, the book was The Power by Naomi Alderman. I think I gave it 3 stars. Loved the idea of this, but I didn't connect with the execution. However, the adaptation with Toni Collette, so good. It's everything I wanted the book to be and more. Toni Collette's amazing. We're following all of these women around the world as they develop this power where they can electrocute things from their hands. Tables turn. Suddenly, women have power and the men are freaking out about it. That's it. That's the general gist. We're following all of these women around the world and it's so fucking good. Toni Collette plays a politician. You can imagine how once you get into politics, something like women having this power could be threatening to men. Check triggers because there are a couple scenes in there as we're following one of the characters that is very dark, and so just be aware of that. But amazing adaptation. The most beautiful book cover you've bought so far this year or been given, and for me, that is The Haunting of Alejandra. This is not doing it justice, but it's freaking gorgeous. And actually, I learned that the person who made this author also did the cover of another book, and that is The Art of Darkness by S. Elizabeth, who has put together this collection, a treasury of the morbid, melancholic, and macabre, and it's gorgeous. The Art of Darkness by S. Elizabeth. That's what that's called. Anyway, same artist. Look at this. So freaking beautiful. So beautiful. This, again, a lot of triggers in this story, but I ended up really, really liking it. Gorgeous. What books do you want to read by the end of the year? All the books. I'm not really taking this question seriously. The most anticipated, of course, is Rouge. I also do quarterly breakdowns of new releases in horror, thriller, sci-fi, and feminist type stuff. So I'll link those above and below as well if you're interested in seeing those. But essentially all of those, like we don't have the time, the battery life, or the manpower to go through all of the books I want to read for the rest of this year. Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? Also, everything I've already mentioned that I haven't read yet. That's it for now. I need to drink some water because I haven't spoken for this long in a long time, and I'm feeling it. Anyway, thank you all for hanging out with me. Thank you for subscribing. Thank you for your beautiful comments and your support, and I love you all. Don't forget that life is short, so read Riley. Cheers and goodbye.